Today we embark on a journey deep into the shadows and echoes of ancient history to a figure whose name still carries an air of power, mystery, and defiance. Nimrod. A man whose legacy seems to slip between the lines of the Bible, whose image is part historical leader, part legend, and part enigma. His life and deeds ripple far beyond the dusty scrolls of Genesis, stretching into myth, prophecy, and warnings that echo through time. He is introduced to us in the scriptures as the grandson of Ham, the great-grandson of Noah, a man born into a world rebuilding itself after unimaginable devastation. The Great Flood had reshaped the earth, erasing the cities, the monuments, and the ambitions of the old world. And yet, in the fertile plains between the Tigris and Euphrates, a new civilization stirred, and in its heart rose Nimrod. But who exactly was he? The Bible tells us he was a mighty hunter before the Lord, yet the original Hebrew hints at something more, something darker. The word can also mean tyrant, one who rebels. This isn't simply a man chasing deer or lions in the wilderness. This is someone who hunted power itself, and perhaps even hunted men. Nimrod's kingdom began in the land of Shinar, Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh, the cradle of Mesopotamian greatness. These weren't just settlements, they were fortified, towering cities planned and built with vision and purpose. He wasn't content with scattered tribes living in fear of wild beasts or neighboring clans. No, Nimrod wanted unity, a kingdom under one ruler, under him. And unity in his mind was not about worshipping God, but about consolidating human strength, building walls that reached toward the clouds, defying the natural order, and declaring independence from the heavens themselves. This vision would lead to one of the most infamous projects in all of history, the Tower of Babel. The Bible's account of this colossal structure is more than a record of ancient architecture. It is a symbol of humanity's boldest and perhaps most dangerous ambition. Flavius Josephus, the first-century historian, suggests that Nimrod built the tower as an act of defiance, a safeguard against another divine flood, and perhaps even as vengeance against the very God who judged the earth. Imagine the audacity to rally the people not in humility after judgment, but in rebellion against it. The plains of Shinar buzzed with activity. Stone upon stone was laid. Fires burned through the night as bricks were baked and mortar mixed. The tower grew, a colossal monument to human pride. But behind the ambition was a subtle, dangerous shift. Nimrod persuaded the people that their prosperity was the work of their own hands, not the blessing of a higher power. Worship of the Creator gave way to the worship of human achievement. And here is where history and legend begin to blur. Ancient Jewish writings, the Midrash, even Mesopotamian myths, paint Nimrod as a man at odds with the patriarch Abraham, a man who demanded loyalty to himself over any god. Some accounts speak of fiery furnaces for those who would not bow, of temples filled with idols, of rituals steeped in blood. His wife Semiramis only deepened the mystique. After Nimrod's death, she seized power with a cunning unmatched in her age. She elevated herself to divine status, proclaiming her late husband a sun god, and presenting her newborn son, Tammuz, as his miraculous reincarnation. The seeds of a mother and child worship system took root, a form of devotion that would spread into countless cultures and religions over the centuries, reshaping spiritual landscapes far beyond Babylon. But Babylon itself became more than a city. It became a symbol, a word that even today speaks of wealth, beauty, and intoxicating grandeur, but also of corruption, idolatry, and spiritual decay. Here arts and sciences flourished, yes, but so did the worship of Moloch, the god to whom children were sacrificed in fire. Here, priests and sorcerers whispered incantations beneath the shadow of ziggurats. Here, divination, astrology, and forbidden rites mingled with politics and trade. And Nimrod's shadow stretched over it all. His name and legend bled into other stories, into the epic of Gilgamesh, into Hercules, into the archetype of the hero who dares to challenge the gods themselves. Yet unlike the noble heroes of later myths, Nimrod's defiance was not about justice, but about self-exaltation. His reign, like all human empires, eventually faced its reckoning. The scriptures say God came down to see the tower, and in a moment that would forever alter the course of human history, he confused their language. The unity Nimrod had forged shattered instantly. Workers could no longer understand each other. Arguments broke out, projects stalled, and soon the people scattered across the earth carrying their new tongues and their stories with them. The tower was left unfinished. The dream of one world under Nimrod collapsed. But the ideas, the culture, and the rebellion he sparked did not vanish. They morphed, they adapted. Babylon, in one form or another, would rise again and again. The end of Nimrod himself is told in fragments, in legend, in hints. Some say he was slain in battle, others claim he was hunted down and executed. A more grisly account describes his body cut into pieces, sent to the corners of his kingdom as a warning. In this we see a poetic irony. The man who sought to unite the people is himself divided, quite literally, in death. And yet, through Semiramis, the cult of Nimrod lived on. Temples still burned incense to him. Festivals honored Tammuz, the dying and rising sun. The mother and child motif took on new names in new lands, spreading to Egypt, Greece, Rome. The imagery survived long after the details were forgotten. As we trace these threads, we begin to see how Nimrod's story is not just a relic of ancient Mesopotamia. It is a mirror, reflecting humanity's recurring temptation to place itself at the center, to build its own towers, to trust in its own might rather than the hand of the divine. His empire may have crumbled into dust, but the spirit of Babel, the impulse to defy heaven, that lingers. From the banks of the Euphrates to the great empires of history, from stone ziggurats to glass skyscrapers, the same question hovers over every human achievement. Will it honor the Creator, or will it challenge him? And so, as we stand at this point in our journey, peering back at the ruins of Babel and forward into the unfolding pages of history, the figure of Nimrod does not fade into silence. Instead, his presence looms, a challenge, a warning, a mystery still demanding to be unraveled. Yet the tale of Nimrod cannot be confined to one moment in time or one corner of the earth. His story, whether recorded in scripture, carved in ancient stone, or whispered in fireside legends, spreads out like the rivers of Mesopotamia themselves, branching, bending, and carrying fragments of his image into every age that followed. Travel with me now to the ruins that still bear the faint breath of those early cities, Nineveh, Calah, Resen. Once, these places were more than names on a tablet. They were living, pulsing centers of trade, politics, and religious devotion. Nimrod's hand, historians believe, either directly or through his descendants, shaped their rise. Massive walls enclose marketplaces, where spices from the east mingled with gold from the west, where scribes etched cuneiform laws into clay, where envoys from distant kingdoms stood before thrones in gilded halls. The physical grandeur was matched by a cultural ambition. It was in these lands that humanity first codified laws, mapped the stars, organized armies, and stored grain for famine. Yet with every advancement, something else advanced alongside it. A system of worship and power that exalted the creation above the creator. This was the genius and danger of Nimrod's legacy, the ability to blend progress with idolatry so seamlessly that they seemed inseparable. Imagine walking through those streets in their prime, the smell of baked bricks mingling with incense from temple fires, statues towering over the squares, their eyes set in polished stone watching every passerby, priests in long robes reading omens from the flight of birds, kings consulting astrologers before waging war. Beneath the wealth and brilliance, an unspoken tension pulsed, the knowledge that this unity was fragile, bound together not by shared love of the divine, but by the charisma and force of a single man's will. In the corridors of power, whispers of rebellion would sometimes drift. There were always those who resisted, those who would not bow to the sun disk or pour offerings to the Queen of Heaven. Some found ways to disappear into the hills. Others paid the ultimate price, vanishing into the silence of temple courts where the fires never went out. Nimrod's empire, for all its vision, could not escape the reality that a kingdom built on defiance invites resistance from both earth and heaven. But the fascination with Nimrod did not die with him. As the centuries rolled forward, his name began to appear in unexpected places, in the writings of Jewish sages, in the chronicles of Islamic historians, in the tales of medieval scholars who tried to trace the origins of every people and language. In each retelling, new layers were added. Some painted him as a giant, others as a sorcerer. Some said he could command the elements, others that he was the first to wear a crown. It is as though every civilization saw in him a reflection of its own fears and ambitions. And so the archetype of Nimrod grew, not merely a man of the past, but a pattern. The pattern of the ruler who seeks to unite the world under his banner, who builds monuments to human strength, who refuses to bow to anything above himself. Babylon was the first stage, but the idea of Babylon would reappear again and again, dressed in the garb of Egypt, Assyria, Rome, and countless empires after them. Each bore the same heartbeat, the desire to reach the heavens on human terms. If we look closely, archaeology begins to whisper confirmations. Excavations in ancient Shinar reveal ziggurats whose remains still scrape the desert sky, their bases wide enough to support towers of staggering height. Cylinder seals, worn smooth by time, depict scenes of gods handing power to kings, images that may trace back to Nimrod's propaganda, the visual claim that his rule was divinely sanctioned. Inscriptions in Akkadian praise kings as shepherds of the people, but also as hunters, a word that, as in Nimrod's case, could mean the hunter of beasts or the conqueror of men. Even the geography of his domain speaks volumes. The land of Shinar sat at the crossroads of east and west, a place where caravans carried ideas as well as goods. To control it was to control not just trade, but thought itself. And Nimrod, if the accounts are to be believed, understood this. His cities were not accidental, they were chess pieces on the board of history. The more we examine, the clearer it becomes that Nimrod's story is less about one man and more about a cycle. The rise of a power that draws all men together for a purpose that ultimately turns their gaze away from heaven. It happened in Babel, it happened in Nineveh, it happened in Babylon the Great, and the thread winds on through the pages of prophecy, hinting that this cycle is not yet complete. But to understand the full reach of his influence, we must also follow the thread into the spiritual realm. Babylon's worship system, rooted in the deification of Nimrod and Semiramis, gave birth to symbols and rituals that would echo into the mythologies of Greece and Rome and beyond. The image of the mother and divine child, the reverence of the sun, the cycles of death and rebirth tied to the seasons, all these can be traced in part back to the fertile soil of Nimrod's kingdom. And here is where the story becomes more than history. Because while cities crumble, ideas endure, towers fall, but the desire to build them remains. The names change, the languages shift, but the heart of Babel beats on. And as we trace it forward through time, we find ourselves asking, where else will it appear? In what form will it rise again? From the shadow of Nimrod's first empire, the story of Babylon stretches forward like a river, winding through the centuries, reshaping itself in the hands of new rulers, yet always retaining that same undercurrent of ambition and defiance. By the time we reach the Neo-Babylonian Empire, under kings like Nebuchadnezzar II, we see not merely the remnants of Nimrod's vision, but its full flowering, an empire of gold, art, and military might that commanded the attention of the known world. Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar gleamed like a jewel in the desert. Its walls were said to be so wide that chariots could race side by side along the top. Its gates, most famously the Ishtar Gate, stood adorned with deep blue tiles and golden lions, bulls, and dragons, each a symbol of the city's power and its gods. And towering above it all, perhaps echoing the old dream of Nimrod, rose the great ziggurat known as Etemenanki, the house of the foundation of heaven and earth. Though built centuries after Nimrod's lifetime, it bore a chilling resemblance to the Tower of Babel described in Genesis, as though Babylon itself could not let go of that first defiant blueprint. It was here that the exiled people of Judah were brought, their temple in Jerusalem reduced to ashes, their treasures carried off as spoils. In this foreign land, the prophets spoke of Babylon not merely as a political enemy, but as a spiritual force, a place where pride rose to the heavens and where the gods of men replaced the worship of the one true God. The name Babylon became more than geography. It became a symbol for every power that exalts itself above the divine. The cultural heartbeat of Babylon pulsed with an intricate blend of art, science, and sorcery. Astronomers mapped the stars, yet those same constellations became instruments of divination. Priests performed elaborate ceremonies to invoke the favor of Marduk, Ishtar, and Shamash, layering the city's identity with a tapestry of myth and ritual. Every festival, every triumphal procession, every towering statue seemed to proclaim the same message, that Babylon was eternal, unmatched, unshakable. Yet beneath the grandeur, cracks formed. The very pride that built its towers would one day invite its downfall. The writings on the palace walls, literally in the days of Belshazzar, would warn of a kingdom measured, weighed, and found wanting. And when the Medes and Persians entered Babylon without a battle by diverting the Euphrates River, it was as though history itself reminded the world that no fortress, no matter how vast, can stand forever. But the idea of Babylon did not perish with its walls. In the centuries that followed, Babylon became a recurring figure in prophecy, a symbol used by seers and apostles to describe future systems of power and belief that would mirror its arrogance and idolatry. The Apostle John, writing in the book of Revelation, spoke of Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, and of the abominations of the earth. Whether he was pointing to Rome, to a future empire, or to a spiritual reality that transcends any one city, the link back to Nimrod's original defiance is hard to ignore. Even outside the biblical record, Babylon's shadow lingered in the imagination of poets, philosophers, and historians. Greek writers like Herodotus described its splendor in awe, while later thinkers used it as a cautionary tale of human pride. In Islamic tradition, too, Babylon is remembered, sometimes as a place of ancient kings, other times as a site where angels descended to teach men forbidden knowledge. And the symbols of Babylon did not vanish with the passing of empires. The lion, the dragon, the sun disk, the winged figure, these motifs traveled with traders and conquerors, appearing in the art and architecture of Persia, Greece, and Rome. Even in modern times, echoes of Babylonian imagery can be found in literature, in monuments, and in the myths that cultures carry forward, often without remembering their origins. It is this persistence that makes Nimrod's story so remarkable. He is not merely a figure of the past, frozen in ancient clay tablets. His vision for unity under human authority, for a kingdom rooted in man's glory rather than God's, is an idea that keeps resurfacing. And every time it does, it wears the clothing of its era, speaking the language of its day, yet carrying that same old heartbeat. Consider how often in history great powers have risen with dreams of global unity, whether under the banner of empire, ideology, or technology. The pattern is the same: the centralization of power, the exaltation of human achievement, the belief that humanity can build its own paradise without need of divine guidance. This is the spirit of Babylon, the legacy of Nimrod marching forward through the ages. Archaeologists today still dig in the dust of Mesopotamia, uncovering the remnants of that ancient ambition. Each baked brick, each fragment of a cylinder seal, each crumbling wall tells a piece of the story. But no ruin, no artifact, can fully capture the living idea that began there, an idea that even now shapes the way we build, the way we rule, and the way we dream of the future. And as we follow that idea forward, past Babylon, past Rome, into the modern age, we begin to see that the story is not finished. The tower may take new shapes, the language may change, but the desire to reach heaven by human hands alone, that remains. From the first moments we encountered him in the pages of Genesis, Nimrod stood as a figure larger than life, the mighty hunter, the empire builder, the man who dared to unite the post-flood world under his banner. His kingdom rose from the fertile soil of Shinar, where he gathered the scattered tribes, forged cities from the dust, and began a legacy of ambition that would ripple through every age to come. We have walked through the bustling streets of his cities, heard the clang of tools shaping the Tower of Babel, and felt the heat of the fires that burned in the temples of Babylon. We have seen how his influence reached beyond brick and mortar, shaping cultures, religions, and the very idea of centralized human power. From Nineveh to Babylon, from the ziggurats of Mesopotamia to the prophetic visions recorded centuries later, the name Nimrod became more than a man. It became a symbol. The threads of his legacy stretch through history like an unbroken cord. Babylon's grandeur under Nebuchadnezzar, the splendor of the Ishtar Gate, the towering Etemenanki, each one a shadow of Nimrod's first vision. The spiritual weight of his rebellion carried forward too, reappearing in the idolatries of empires, in the myths of gods and kings, in the systems of power that sought to elevate man above the Creator. Prophets warned of Babylon not simply as a city, but as a spirit, a recurring force in human history, seductive and dangerous, and time has proven them right. From ancient empires to modern movements, the temptation to build towers to heaven in our own strength, to unify the world under human authority, to trade divine truth for human pride, continues to echo. We've seen how archaeology confirms the grandeur of his world, how ancient tablets and broken walls still whisper of the ambition that once consumed the plains of Shinar. We've seen how mythology kept his image alive, not as a distant relic, but as an archetype that still resonates. And we've seen how Scripture uses his story as both history and warning, calling us to remember that all human kingdoms, no matter how glorious, are weighed in the balance of divine justice. Nimrod's story is the story of humanity's potential and its peril. He was a leader, a visionary, a unifier, but also a rebel, a deceiver, and a cautionary tale. His life shows us what can be built when people work together, and what is lost when they forget who gave them breath. His cities may lie in ruins, his tower long crumbled to dust, but the spirit of Babel is not dead. It rises in every age, in every heart that seeks glory without humility, unity without truth, and power without God. And so we close this chapter with the image of a man whose reach extended far beyond his lifetime. Nimrod, hunter, king, builder, and symbol, still stands at the crossroads of history and prophecy, still challenges us to ask, whose kingdom are we building and whose name will we lift high? Because the story is not yet finished.